Hey, it's Daryl Stetler with New Start Discipleship. Welcome to Discipleship Launch, how to start building a culture of discipleship in your church. This is session 1, and I am super excited that you are with us today. And we're live on many different places. Specifically, I'm live at launch.newstartdiscipleship.com. This is also being broadcast on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and places like that. So if you're here, I'm really excited that you're here. I'm glad that you've taken the time today. We're going to learn a lot of stuff together. So stick with us. If you want to go to launch.newstartdiscipleship.com, you can download the notes that are there and all of that. You can download those things and you can get on my email list so you can know when the next 2 segments, actually 3 segments, come out on these videos. You'll be the first to know, and I'll send you a link to that. So make sure that you come join me at launch.newstartdiscipleship.com and subscribe to my email list if you like this content. I think it's going to be really, really helpful to you. All right, so let's get rolling right into it. I want to introduce myself a little bit. Like I said, my name is Daryl. I am the pastor of a church. I'm actually a dad and a husband first and a Christian first. I've got a wife and 7 kids, so I'm blessed and tired. And I've been a pastor for 21 years at this little brick church right here in Oklahoma City. The first time that we came here, the first day we were here, we had 12 people, including my wife and I. This is about a month after we arrived, so we averaged 16 people the first month. And so that was kind of the situation. It's kind of a church restart. And we grew gradually over the course of time, started adding some people, and our church started looking a little more like our community, kind of a mixture of black and white and brown. And in that time, as we continue to grow and make progress over the years, we've grown to about 100 people roughly, and we've managed to help plant another church and send out some families. Kids who grew up here are now pastoring other churches, and so we've kind of tried to dial in on discipleship. For a long time, I really didn't know how to do that. In fact, when I was at this stage of our church right here, where we were starting to grow, man, I wanted to be a super pastor. I wanted to blow the doors off and change the world, but you know how it is? Like, you're like, I don't even know if I know how to do that. I mean, then when I got to this stage right here, where we've grown a little bit, we're making some progress, and now it's busier, right? Because you got hospital calls and premarital counseling and administration and making sure the church gets clean and the lawn gets mowed, right? And so by that time, it wasn't just that I didn't know how, I don't have time either. I'm just overwhelmed, and it's too busy. And I just don't have time. The load's too heavy. However, see if you can relate to this statement. I didn't have time to figure out a discipleship process, but I definitely had time to feel guilty about it. You know what I'm saying? Right? Like when you're trying to go to sleep and you're laying there, you're like, oh, I got to go to bed. And you're thinking, man, so-and-so's falling through the cracks, and this person's not doing well spiritually. And I'm like, I'm going to have to figure this out. Like, I've got to figure out how to do a better job of making disciples, not just putting people's behinds in seats, right? Not just drawing a crowd, but making disciples. So if that's where you've been before, then I think that this is going to be really helpful to you. Let me tell you why I think you should listen, all right? Here's why I think you should listen. The reason I think you should listen is because I'm not a theorist. I'm a practitioner. I am a full-time pastor. I've been doing that for 21 years. And out of my frustrations with learning what discipleship is and how to make disciples, I became the developer of the New Start Discipleship System, which is really hard to hold in my hands right now. But it is a lot of different tools that work through and make it possible for a busy pastor or any Christian to spend 1 to 2 years with a brand new convert until they have really got their feet under them and you've helped them learn to walk with Jesus. And so that's what I've developed. And so I think I've got some things to say that'll be helpful to you. And so I want to start off with this right here. If you are taking notes, by the way, I've got handouts, and so you can follow along there. Discipleship is not a chore to be done. It is an opportunity to be seized. And that I really fully believe that, because the truth is, it's not something that's a drudgery. It's not something that's like, oh, I got one more thing I got to do. No, it is the thing. It is an opportunity that you need to lay hold on, because if you'll disciple people, God will send you more people to disciple. I believe that with all of my heart. And we're starting to see that happen here as we've made the change from just attractional ministry to discipleship-focused ministry. And I want to talk to you about the things that had to happen in me for that to happen. All right. So for that change, for us to make that shift as a church, there had to be some things that shifted for me. Today, I want to talk to you about that. I want to tell you the 3 secrets for getting started with discipleship. So early on in my ministry, it was very much like the first time I tried to go body surfing. I lived nowhere near an ocean. I visited a cousin in Florida, and he knew about a private stretch of beach where nobody else was. And so we went there, and the waves were kind of big. And I was like, I'm going to try this bodyboard thing. And so I went, and I went out and tried to get out into the waves. And if you ever done that, you know this feeling of like it's like water starts to suck past you and leave. And you look up, and there's a building of water right there beside you. And so, pow, that thing hit me, and it knocked me down. I slammed on the sand, and like the Atlantic Ocean, and most of it jetted into my nostrils. And so I stand up, and I'm sputtering and spewing, and I get the water out of my eyes just in time to get knocked down by the next wave. My relationship with discipleship was very much like that for a while. I'd get knocked down by a wave of busyness. I'd stand up and be like, okay, we got to figure this thing out. Pow! And get knocked down by another wave of bitterness. And you can do that. I don't know if you know this as a pastor, but you can do that for 20 years, right? I did for several years. You see, if you're taking notes, the one thing that most pastors neglect about discipleship is having an actual plan that they've thought through and committed to. Like having an actual plan. In fact, that's the number one thing that most of the pastors on my email list, I have about 5,000 pastors on my email list, most of them said, I don't have a clear plan. It wasn't healthy for my church. It wasn't healthy for me. A lot of times, there's a lot of pastors these days, they spend way too much of their time in two unhealthy places. The first one is what I call us for and no more, right? Small church, it's a small church mindset. They're not making progress. And in this space, they use words like pure and tradition and faithful. But most pastors intuitively understand we got to get out of that, right? It's not okay. The problem is that they go straight to unhealthy place number two. And that unhealthy place number two is bigger at any cost. It's the obsession with church growth. It's the obsession with numbers. It's the obsession with putting behinds in seats and dollars in plates. I mean, we're sincere, and so we defend our existence and our perspective by using words like impact and relevant and dynamic. But you know what? The truth is, we've all seen it. It leaves us with a trail of broken pastors and broken church people and frustrated churches, because it's like every time somebody comes in here, we feel like we've got to just outlast them, and that leads to a frustrated person in the pulpit and a frustrated bunch of people in the pews. Now, what if we just decided we're not doing it? We have decided that is canceled. We have decided we're just not participating in this two ditches on either side of the road, right? I want to help you move to the place that is really it's more sustainable and healthy. Carl Vaders, in his book, Desizing the Church, calls it discipleship. He says that something that looks a lot like discipleship has got to be what's next if we can learn how to move away from the obsession with church growth. What is next? Well, I think it does look a lot like discipleship. And in that space, we use words like mentorship, transformation, holiness, community, equipping, slow and steady, right? So I'm going to help you move from the us for and no more space into the discipleship space. Or maybe you've been in unhealthy space number two and you need to make that move. Either way, we're going to talk about three secrets, all right? The three things that need to happen in you so that your church can make that transition. Secret number one, make discipleship the main thing. Jesus already told us what the main thing is. You see, maintenance is important. It is, sure. I mean, you got to take care of things. But if you can have a mowed lawn and manicured shrubs and not make disciples, that's called failure. And marketing is important. It's very important. We do some marketing here. You ought to do it there, I think. But to gather a crowd but not make disciples, that's called failure. In fact, discipleship is the main point of the Great Commission. It is literally, even linguistically in Greek, the main verb of the Great Commission is not go or teaching or baptizing. It is make disciples. In fact, it should be translated, while you're going, make disciples. Now that's awkward in English, so they don't translate it that way, but it's like going, make disciples. In other words, Jesus already knows you're going to go. He knows you're going to go. You're going to go to the store. Your people are going to go to the store and school and work and family reunions and Walmart, right? You're going to go. While you're going, make disciples. That's the big idea. It's the main point. Now, if that's true, you've got to decide that your priority, your big idea, is going to match what Jesus said. So this is a switch that has to happen inside you as the leader. It can't happen first in the other people in the pew. A lot of times it's going to have to be because you've prayed over it, you've thought of it, you've said, I'm going to have to flip the switch in here so that then that decision can work its way out into the priorities and the time schedules and the budgets and the staff meetings of my church. That's the way it's going to have to work. All right. So first of all, make discipleship the main thing. That's the first big switch that has to flip for you. Secondly, number 2 is commit to the long haul. Commit to the long haul. Obsession with size is not healthy for your church. It's not. But an obsession with making disciples, a commitment, a firm, long-standing commitment that says, I'm going to commit the next 20 years of my life. And 20 years from now, you're going to find me not just following one more trend, church growth trend, or one more creative ministry idea. You're going to find me still making disciples, working with people and getting them established so they can make other disciples. That's where it's at. You're going to have to commit to the long haul. In fact, you're going to have to see the vision even when you start small. A willingness to start small is really crucial. In fact, it's so important. I'm going to write it up here, okay? Because start small, be willing to start small is really, really super, super important. In fact, there's an incredible verse in Zechariah. Zechariah chapter 4, verse number 10, that is vital. You may think of Zechariah 4 and you think of the verse, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord. But this is a different one. Do not despise these small beginnings. Now, in that context, you understand what was happening. The exiles had come back from Babylon. They had begun to gather back in, and they're trying to build a temple, right? They laid a foundation, and some people are bad-mouthing it because it's not as big and it's not as fancy as the one their grandpa told them, or they saw the first temple, before it was torn down. And so they're bad-mouthing it, they're crying, and God, through the prophet, says, everybody stop. I've got something to say. And here's what he says. Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin, to see the plumb line in Zerubbabel's hand. This is an incredible, incredible principle. Do you understand that God is committed he's not in love with some future version of your church, right? He's not in love with some future version of your church where like, oh, now they've accomplished something. They filled the building up and they've got this and this and this in their creative ministry, and the local news stations doing stories on them. No, God's not in love with some future version of your church. God is excited when he sees your hands reach for the tools. Have you ever considered this about the Lord? That when God sees you reach for something and say, you know what? I've decided I'm going to pick up a tool and I'm going to make a disciple. God says, yes, he's reaching for the tools. Yes, there he goes. Yes, he's picked up the tools. The Lord rejoices not because the work is done, but because the work is beginning. So you got to be willing to start small. You got to be okay with that. Now, let me give you, though, something that I read in Leroy Ames' book, The Lost Art of Disciple Making. It blew my mind at the time, and it's been affecting my mindset ever since. Here's what he said. He said, imagine that in year number 1, you decided, I am going to make a disciple. And by the end of year number 1, there were 2 of you. You spent a year with one other person. You said, I am going to pour my life and my wisdom and my biblical knowledge and my teaching and my time and my encouragement. I'm going to pour it into another person for a year. I'm going to spend a year with one person. And during that year, I'm going to tell that person, you're going to do what I'm doing with you. You're going to do it with somebody else. And so at the end of that year, you say, it's time. We're going to stay in touch. I'm going to keep meeting with you, but it's time. I want you to go find somebody else. That person that you've been witnessing to at work, I want you to I want you to see if you can pray with them and see them accept Christ and believe in Him, become a believer, and then you're going to disciple them. So get started. All right, here we go. And so when you do that, at the end of year 2, let's imagine at the end of year 2, now you've got 4. There are 4 of you. At the end of year 3, there's 8. At the end of year 4, 16. But that's at the end of 4 years. You're beginning the 5th year, man. That doesn't seem like a lot of results for 4 years of work. It's not going to get you on the list of fastest growing churches in America. It probably isn't going to make your district superintendent or your bishop or whoever call and say, what are you guys doing up there? I'm hearing some amazing things. This is probably not going to happen with that kind of results. 4 years of work, and there's 16 disciples being made. But wait. You see, at the end of year 5, there'd be 32. And then the end of year 6, it'd be 64. At the end of year 7, you're talking about 128. At the end of year 8, you're talking about 256. And you get the idea. Then 512 and 1,028 and 2,056. Right? What am I saying? I'm saying you got to be able to see the potential when you start small. Jesus spent 3.5 years with 12 guys, and he had that God thing going for him. You too have the opportunity to commit, to be willing to commit to starting, even if it means starting small, because you can see the vision. I've made a decision here at my church, and I've decided we're going to commit to this. We're going to make the decision that we're going to stay with it. We're going to be willing to start small. We have committed to this for the long haul. I've been in ministry over 20 years now. The next 20 years of my ministry are going to be about this right here. That's what the next 20 years is going to be about. And I think it ought to be that way for you too. What if you decided that the next 10 years or 20 years is going to be about this right here? Do you know how long it would take to disciple the entire world if you could sustain that? If you could sustain it to where every year you just made one disciple and you taught that person how to make a disciple, and they went and did the same thing, and that just continued to pass on that simple truth of following Christ and being in obedience to Him, and that, you know how long it would take to disciple the entire world? The entire world, 35 years. 35 years. 8 billion people. 35 years. That's incredible. Now, I know people at this point, there's always somebody out there, and it might be you, saying, yeah, but you can't really sustain that. I mean, nobody can really sustain that. How do you even know that it's happening? And okay, I mean, I understand that may not be true. But you know what? I've decided I'm committed to the long haul. I'm willing to start small, and I'm gonna continue pressing on this front until I see how far I can go over the next 20 years. Here's my goal. My goal, I'm not going to share this. It's not even in your handout. Here's my goal. My goal is to start a disciple-making movement. There have only been a few in history that have been able to accomplish this right here. But I want to start a disciple-making movement that goes 10 wide and 10 deep. So I disciple this person who disciples another person, and each of these people disciples a person as well. All right, so you get the idea, and it goes 10 wide and 10 deep. Every one of these discipling, and those. So that chain is unbroken, and these chains all start as well. You see, that's the multiplying power of a disciple-making movement. That's what I want to do, and I want to invite you to make the switch to looking at this as the way that you're going to spend your life, instead of just one more attractional ministry, one more gimmick. Let's just go make disciples and see what happens over the course of 20 years. That's what I want to invite you to. And I think that it's a much healthier, much more sustainable, and much more scriptural way of doing ministry. You see, Paul talked to Timothy about it, didn't he? Right? The things you've heard from me, give to other faithful men who are able to teach others also, in 2 Timothy 2. Right? Paul's never going to meet those people, but he knows that he's given Timothy something that is able to be passed on. Talk more about that before this discipleship series of videos is over. All right, so let's talk now. If you're convinced, if you're saying, yep, I'm convinced, this is what I need to do, I'm committed, I just want to tell you, feel free to say amen down in the chat, all right? Put comments down below. If you have questions, put those down below as well, because I want to respond to those questions and interact. The next video that I make, I'd love to be able to answer some of those questions, and so I want to invite you to jump in and the chat down below. So right now, if you're convinced, put that. If you're like, I'm in, I'm going to do 20 years that way, put that. All right. So now at this point, there's a lot of objections that tend to come up for people. So they're thinking, okay, yeah, but my church board's not on board with this, and my church people, like, they're not very interested. In fact, that's one of the things that frequently the pastors said in my survey that I did recently about discipleship with my email list. They were like, my church board is not going to go along. My people just don't seem interested in that. Okay, let's do some talking about that, because there's something that has to happen in you before it can happen in them. All right, so let's talk about that. Later on in this series, I'm going to talk about the importance of how to get your church board on your team. I have coaching on that and all of that, so we'll talk about that. But this is what I want to tell you right now, okay? This is secret number 3. Start inviting people into discipleship with or without your leadership team. It may be that your church people don't see the vision for this right now. That's all right. Not a problem. My family tells a story. We love this joke. There was a guy who came walking in one day after playing golf, and he collapsed into his easy chair. And his wife said, "Honey, what's the matter? Are you okay?" He said, "It was a terrible day." He said, "Bob had a heart attack and collapsed and died on the 3rd green." She said, "Oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry. That must have been terrible." He said, "It was. The rest of the day, hit the ball, drag Bob. Hit the ball, drag Bob." Yeah, we love telling this story. In fact, we use that phrase in our family, hit the ball, drag Bob. And the way we use it is this, that sometimes when you know what your mission is and you know what you have to do, you can't let other people dragging their feet stop you from doing what it is that you really know is right. Right? You have to hit the ball, drag Bob. All right. Now I know that's terrible. That's terrible, but it's such a funny way to say it. We're just like, hit the ball. When you come to your church leadership team and you're like, I know I got to make disciples. I got to make discipleship the main thing, but they're stopping me, and I want to say, hit the ball, drag Bob. Right? Just go hit the ball. Go hit the ball. Don't worry about whether or not everybody's going to go along. Now, I don't think it's important that you don't despise them, right? It's important. I'm not wanting you to be a person who despises your leadership team, who despises your church board, or looks down on them, or kind of turns their nose up at them. No. What I want you to do is to love them into transformation, but don't let them stop you from making that decision, right? They may not see the vision right now, and that's okay. That's okay. You can move forward anyway. Nobody is stopping you from making, I'm going to pull this back down here. Nobody is stopping you from making that one disciple. Nobody can stop you from doing that. Go do that. Go do that. And you got plenty of time to preach about this. You got plenty of time to convince people about this. You have plenty of time to put a system into place and have something and I'll talk about that before we're done with these 4 videos. That's the important thing, right? You are getting started with or without the people that are on your leadership team right now. Don't let them hold you back from this. Now, I'll talk more about how to get the church board on your leadership team, actually in video number 4. I'll be talking some about that. But I just want to tell you, go ahead and get started with or without them. Seth Godin has a really profound point in his book, Poke the Box. And he says, don't wait for someone to pick you. Pick yourself. Pick yourself. You don't have to be the one standing up against the wall like you're in elementary or middle school waiting for them to pick you. Remember doing this, right? Like, everybody's going to play dodgeball up against the wall. And you're like, oh, okay, wait for them to pick you. I was the small kid, right? So when you're in that, you're not in that situation anymore. You're not there. Don't do that. Pick yourself. Someone ought to be making disciples. I pick me. Somebody ought to be making the difference in the world in this way. Somebody ought to be choosing to go forward regardless of anything else and saying, I'm going to make one disciple this year. I pick me. Pick yourself. Don't wait. You see, the truth is that Jesus didn't wait for your church board to give you permission. He gave you a great commission. Jesus, I'll say it one more time because you got to hear this, y'all. Jesus didn't wait for your church board to give you permission. He gave you a great commission, right? Go start making disciples and leave the rest of it and start making your case. Yeah, absolutely preach about it. Absolutely talk about it. Absolutely have those conversations, which we're going to talk about. But you've got to get started with or without the other people. All right. Now, objections. Well, people are like, okay, Daryl, maybe I'm convinced. I don't have a plan. Okay, I get it. That's the number one thing I said a while ago that the pastors on my email list are struggling with. I don't have a clear plan. So I'll deal with that, I promise. In fact, in the next video, I'm going to show you the kind of transformation that you can expect when you just start allocating resources toward discipleship. And I'm going to talk to you about discipleship pathways and all that kind of stuff and building a system. I'm going to talk to you about all that. But this video is about the transformation that's got to start inside you, the opportunity before you, and you've got to decide to go seize it. So if I'm going to talk in the next video about the importance of putting resources toward discipleship, some people say, I don't have any resources. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. In fact, I'm going to tell you 4 kinds of resources in the next video. So make sure you watch out for that. If you are not on my email list, you ought to go to launch.newstartdiscipleship.com. And so launch, instead of the www, just put launch there. Launch.newstartdiscipleship.com. And that will take you to a page where you can download the notes. You can sign up for my email list so that I can get that to you and you'll be the first one to know when that video goes live in just a couple of days in the morning. All right. So make sure you do that. And so I'm super excited. I want to just briefly say, if you are wondering about these resources, I will talk about specifically how you can get them. In fact, I am actually going to, in a few days, open up the cart on a special deal that I've never offered before. All right, a coaching program and like a customer success journey, like a discipleship success journey. It's a discipleship launch that will help you get there. An 8-week coaching program. So we're going to talk through that and show you. I've never done it before. Super, super excited to share that with you. So make sure you sign up for that email list. We'll be talking about it over the next few days and trying to give you as much value as I possibly can so you can catch the vision for what God's able to do, building a discipleship culture in your local church. Let's get started. God bless you. Thank you for being here today. See you next time.